just for Annie Costabo to drop this bombshell of an article. My goodness, the owners are not responding to the players' latest offer. They're not even responding to it. They're not sending an counter. They are done with the chit chat. They are done with the games and the back and forth. It looks like the owners are about to lock this thing.
Listen, it's been 14 days since the WNBA owners got the players' latest proposal. 14 full days of complete silence. And now we're staring down this January 9th deadline that's just 2 days away. This isn't how negotiations work. When one party just goes dark like this, they're not negotiating anymore. They've already decided what they're going to do. And everything we're seeing right now points to one thing. The 2026 WNBA season is about to get locked out.
Players are seeking a salary cap of over $10 million and 30% of league revenue. We already know the owner said doing something like this will cause them to lose $700 million plus. Are y'all crazy? Let's get into this article, man. This is by Annie Costable. Shout out to you. Let's get into it. A little more than 48 hours.
This moved past speculation when Front Office Sports broke the story on January 7th. What they confirmed matches exactly what people inside the situation have been saying quietly for over a week. The league got the union's response somewhere around December 20th. Since that moment, absolutely nothing. No response, no phone calls, no acknowledgement that they even received it. The ownership group has completely disconnected from these discussions.
Proposal they submitted roughly 2 weeks ago as of Wednesday afternoon. They haven't responded to these ladies in 2 weeks. They're done. It's a wrap. It's a wrap. It's over. It's over. They haven't responded. It's January 7th. The owners didn't even want the deadline to be extended this long because they was already done with the back and forth. They have not responded in 2 weeks. The deadline is in 2 days.
So what exactly are the players pushing for here? They want a salary cap set at $10.25 million plus 30% of gross revenue. Let me break down what that actually means. Right now, the salary cap sits at $1.5 million. So we're looking at 7 times the current amount. Player salaries would go from an average of roughly $50,000 to something around $300,000. Maximum deals under their plan would start at $1.3 million and climb all the way to $2.78 million by the contract's end. Now let's compare that to what ownership actually offered back in early December. The league's proposal was 70% of net revenue, which according to sources equals less than 15% of what the league actually brings in. Their salary cap proposal went from the current $1.5 million up to $5 million. That's still more than triple what exists now. But the players looked at that and basically said, we want twice what you're offering, and we want it calculated from gross numbers, not net.
Losses for the league and its teams over the duration of the CBA, according to that report. They're not doing it. They're not doing a $10.5 million salary cap with 30. It's not happening. Caitlin Clark talked about compromise. Where's the compromise coming from, y'all? You've heard a lot of chatter about what we're asking for is not sustainable for the business, Nafisa Collier said during an Unrivaled broadcast Monday. Being on this side with Unrivaled, I know what it takes to run a sustainable business. Respectfully, y'all doing 3-on-3 in the same.
This is where the mathematics become impossible to ignore. ESPN sources say the league ran detailed financial projections on what the players are demanding. What they found was devastating. Accepting these terms would create $700 million in losses for the league and all its teams over the life of this CBA. $700 million. That's not a starting point for negotiation. That's a deal killer. Think about what that number actually represents here. The WNBA has survived entirely on NBA subsidies since it started operating. We're talking about a league that has never generated profit being asked to commit to losses that would be historically unprecedented. Sure, 2024 delivered record ratings and attendance, largely because of the Caitlin Clark phenomenon, but one successful season doesn't erase decades of operating in the red, and it definitely doesn't justify risking $750 million on hoping that momentum sustains itself.
Chartered flights. Y'all not traveling all around the world, paying for all these bigger rings. Y'all not doing all of that, man. Stop. Y'all playing 3-on-3 in the same gym every day. No disrespect. It's cool. I'm glad everybody's making their money. I hope everybody get their money and stay healthy. But it's not the same thing. Stop it. Just stop, man. And at the same time, y'all talking about partnering with the WNBA, but you constantly taking shots. This is part of the reason they probably ain't responding to your ass for 2 weeks.
Now let's address the power dynamic that's developing here. The players voted to authorize a strike back in November. The vote was 98% yes, with 93% of players participating. That's an incredibly strong mandate. But here's what makes the current situation fascinating. The owners are the ones who've gone silent, which means any work stoppage that happens will be a lockout initiated by ownership, not a strike called by the players. That difference is huge. A lockout carries a completely different message than a strike does. When players walk away, they're the ones refusing to work. When owners lock out, they're saying your demands are so unreasonable that we're done trying to accommodate them. It's a power play. And based on the timeline, based on this wall of silence from ownership, based on everything we're witnessing, that's exactly where this is heading. Aircraft carrier
deal, those numbers will climb to almost $2,780,000 respectively. So at the end of the day, man, the owners have checked out. They said, listen, man, we done with the games. We're done with the back and forth. They haven't responded for 2 weeks. The owners haven't responded to these ladies for 2 weeks. They after all of these talks, 2 extensions later, y'all are still talking about 30% of the revenue, $10.5 million.
Here's what's not being talked about. We need to talk about the unrivaled situation because Kelsey Plum brought it up during Monday's broadcast. She said, quote, "You've heard a lot of chatter about what we're asking for is not sustainable for the business. Being on this side with Unrivaled, I know what it takes to run a sustainable business." She's basically using Unrivaled's existence as evidence that the WNBA's financial worries are exaggerated, but this comparison falls apart when you examine it closely. Unrivaled is 3-on-3 basketball, played in the same facility every single day. There are no travel expenses beyond getting players to Miami initially, no arena rental fees across 12 different markets, no chartered flights crossing the country for 40 games schedule, no massive operational infrastructure. They've got 6 courts in one building and they rotate games between them. The business models are completely different universes. Using Unrivaled's 1 year of operation as proof that the WNBA can handle a $10.5 million salary cap is like comparing a food truck to a restaurant chain.
Move on with the rookies, Caitlin Clark, the rookie contract players, the Sonia Citrons, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese's. Bring in the draft picks, Olivia Miles, Flau'jae, Lauren Betts, all of these draft picks, bring them in. You got Lexi Brown and Kalani Brown under contract and move on replacement players at this point. I want to see Caitlin Clark play in the WNBA in 2026, and I don't care if it's against Nafisa Collier or if it's against replacement players and new drafted players. I don't give a damn. I want to watch Caitlin Clark. This is nonsense. I'm fed up.
So here's something crucial. The owners already extended this deadline twice. The original CBA expiration was November 30th, 2024. Both sides agreed to push it back, and when that deadline approached, they pushed it back again. The ownership group didn't want that second extension. They were already frustrated with how these negotiations were going, but they agreed to it anyway, presumably hoping the extra time would produce some kind of breakthrough. Instead, the players returned with a proposal that basically doubled what the league said it could afford. And the owners have responded with complete silence. That tells you everything about their mindset right now. They provided additional time. They received an offer they consider financially impossible, and they've concluded there's nothing left to discuss. Meanwhile, Adam Silver is out there discussing NBA expansion into European markets. He's not at the WNBA negotiating table. He's not mediating these discussions. He's not coming in to save the situation. The players wanted his involvement, wanted his influence, wanted the NBA's financial resources to make their demands feasible. But Silver has made it clear through his absence that this is the WNBA's responsibility to resolve, not the NBA.
I want to watch this no more. They're not covering it. They're not talking about this stuff on ESPN, on Fox, nothing. Nobody's talking about Unrivaled. It's dead right now. I'm keeping it real. Even as a creator, when you create content about Unrivaled, The numbers is low. Nobody's really checking for it. Let's keep it real. Y'all playing games, and it seems like the owners are done with the back and forth. They have not responded for 2 weeks, and we are 2 days away from the January 9th deadline. It's about to be a lockout. Get down in the comments and let me know what you think. This is Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe.
Let's game out what a lockout. What actually happens if January 9th arrives without an agreement. There are 3 basic scenarios. First, both sides could agree to extend the deadline a 3rd time, pushing this further down the road. But given the ownership silence, that seems highly unlikely. Why would they extend when they're not even engaging with the current proposal? Second, we could enter what's called a status quo period, where the current CBA terms continue operating while negotiations proceed. Under status quo, the players could call a strike at any point, but they can't do it without first terminating the extended agreement. That gives ownership some leverage because it forces the players to make the first move toward a work stoppage. Third, and this looks like the most probable outcome right now, the owners initiate a lockout. They say, we're not operating under the current CBA terms anymore, and we're not accepting your proposal. The season doesn't happen until you return with something realistic. Let me paint the picture of what a lockout actually looks like in practice. The 2026 draft is scheduled for April. Free agency typically opens in February. Training camps start in April and May. The season begins in May. If owners lock out players on January 9th, all of that gets frozen completely. No signings, no trades, no camps, nothing happens. But here's where it gets really interesting. Rookie contracts operate differently. Players like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, they're already under contract. The draft picks coming in April. Players like Olivia Miles, Kiki Iriafin, Lauren Betts, they'd be signing new rookie deals. The question becomes, can the league actually operate with just rookies and players still under contract? Legally, maybe. Practically, that's a different conversation entirely. You'd have rosters filled with first and second year players, massive talent gaps between teams, and a product that looks absolutely nothing like what fans expect to see. But if the owners are truly finished negotiating, if they're willing to let this situation play out completely, replacement players and rookies might be exactly what we end up with. And here's the uncomfortable reality that nobody wants to acknowledge out loud. The WNBA's ratings explosion in 2024 was driven almost entirely by one player. Caitlin Clark's games averaged 1.2 million viewers. Games without her averaged around 400,000. That's a 3-to-1 ratio. So if the choice becomes no season at all versus a season with Caitlin Clark and a bunch of rookies and replacement players, which one do you think casual fans would prefer to watch? The hardcore WNBA fans, the ones who've supported this league for years, they'd be absolutely furious. They'd boycott. They'd call it a complete betrayal. But the new fans, the ones who showed up because of Clark, they might not care who she's playing against as long as she's on the court. That's brutal to say out loud, but it's probably the calculation ownership is making right now. This entire situation exposes the fundamental tension that's been building in the WNBA for years. You've got veteran players who've sacrificed everything, who've played overseas every winter just to make ends meet, who've watched NBA players get wealthy while they struggled financially. They see 2024's success and think this is finally our moment. This is when we get paid what we're actually worth. And they're not completely wrong to feel that way. But business reality doesn't care about fairness or sacrifice or what people deserve. It cares about revenue and expenses and whether the numbers actually work. And right now the numbers don't work. The league brought in record revenue in 2024, somewhere around $200 to $250 million, based on available reporting. That's fantastic growth. But when you're asking for 30% of gross revenue with a $10.5 million salary cap across 12 teams, you're talking about roughly $125 million going to player salaries alone. Add in the operational costs, the chartered flights the players also want, the improved facilities, the housing stipends, the fertility benefits, all the other requests, and you're spending more than you're making. The players would argue that's a short-term problem, that investing in them now will grow the league faster, that you have to spend money to make money. And there's logic to that argument, but it's asking the owners to gamble hundreds of millions of dollars on that theory. And these aren't NBA owners with unlimited cash to burn. These are WNBA team owners who've been losing money for years, who've stuck with the league out of belief in its potential. who finally saw some light at the end of the tunnel, and who are now being asked to dive deeper into debt on the promise that it'll pay off eventually. Can you really blame them for saying no? Can you blame them for looking at a proposal that would cost them $700 million and just walking away from the negotiating table? Because that's exactly what's happened here. They haven't countered. They haven't negotiated. They've just stopped talking completely. And when someone stops talking in a negotiation, it means they've already decided the answer is no. The tragedy here is that both sides probably want the same thing, ultimately. They want a thriving WNBA that's financially sustainable and pays players well. But they're so far apart on how to get there, and neither side seems willing to bridge that gap. The players see compromise as accepting less than they deserve. The owners see the players' demands as financial suicide. And now we're 48 hours from a deadline with no deal in sight, and one side refusing to even respond. What happens next? If I'm handicapping this situation, I'd say there's a 70% chance of a lockout, 20% chance of a third extension with major concessions from the players, and 10% chance of a miraculous breakthrough. The owners hold all the leverage here. They can operate without the veterans if they have to. They can rebuild with rookies. It's not ideal, but it's possible. The players, on the other hand, they need the season to happen. Most of them can't afford to miss a year of salary. Some will go overseas, but that's not an option for everyone, especially players with families or injury concerns. So the pressure is on the union to blink first, and that might be exactly what the owners are counting on. By going silent, by refusing to engage, they're forcing the players to come back with something more realistic. It's hardball negotiation tactics. It's uncomfortable. It's going to make a lot of people angry, but it might be the only way to get a deal that actually works financially. And the question for fans is, what do you want to see happen? Do you want the players to get everything they're asking for, even if it means the league loses massive amounts of money and potentially folds in a few years? Do you want the owners to hold firm, even if it means a lockout and a compromise? Or do you want both sides to find middle ground, even though right now they seem miles apart? Because here's the reality. If this lockout happens, if the 2026 season gets canceled or played with replacement players, all that momentum from 2024 evaporates. The casual fans who just discovered the WNBA because of Caitlin Clark, they're not going to stick around through a labor dispute. They'll move on to something else, and the league will be right back where it started. Fighting for relevance, struggling for viewers, trying to prove it deserves to exist. That's what's at stake here. Not just money. Not just this one CBA, but the entire future trajectory of women's professional basketball in America. And right now, with 2 days until the deadline, and the owners refusing to even respond to the players' proposal, that future looks more uncertain than it has in years.